It's 6 o'clock. I'm calling to order this regular meeting of the City Council of the City of Bandera. It's Thursday, December 13th, 2020. We are at Pioneer RV Park Recreation Hall at 1202 Maple Street, Bandera, Texas. All council members are present. The city administrator is present. The city secretary is present. And our marshal is present. With that being said, we all would you lead us in prayer, and then we'll have a pledge of allegiance.
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing us all together this evening. First of all, we'd like to ask for your blessings upon this meeting and our city council. We'd also like to ask for your blessings upon our country as we go through this troubled time, the number of people that are sick, loved ones that are lost. I'd also like to ask everyone to keep in our hearts the reason for the season, remember why we're here and the things that we do, and most of all, remember your Son who died upon the cross for our many sins. Lord, thank you for saving a messed up sinner like me. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. Item 3 is visitors to be heard. No one has signed up to be heard. Do we have anyone that sent in an email, Jill? No. Thank you. Item 4 is the consent agenda. Item A, approval of minutes from November 17th, 2020 special meeting, November 19th, 2020 regular meeting. Jared.
I'd like to make a motion. Move to approve.
Thank you. Second. Darcy seconds. All in favor? All in favor, none opposed. Item 5, discussion of possible action on the following items. Item A, introduction to council from applicants that applied for the vacant city council seat in the specific order they were received in the city office. So we'll listen to all 3 candidates, y'all, and then we'll start entertaining motions. You're welcome to ask them questions as they're speaking. And so let's move on. Item number 1 is Robert Johnson.
First of all, thank you for having me. My name is Robert Johnson. Some of you know me, some of you don't. A little background history. I moved to Bandera roughly 2 years ago. Of course, I visited Bandera many years prior to that. I've come with my plans. I came here to basically retire here. I love the town. I love the people. I have a personal agenda joining city council. My goal is to serve the community in the best way that I can. I own a small business for myself. I help people get out of timeshares. Then in basically business management. I have a business management degree. I've managed basically all my professional career. Dealt with finances, human resources, etc., etc. And basically just looking to serve the people of this community the best that I can. Is there any questions I can answer for you? I didn't bring it. I didn't even know I was going to be doing a speech until about 3 hours ago.
I have one for you. Why did you choose not to run in the election?
Actually, my fiance, well, let me rephrase. Prior to this, y'all had another open type of situation. My fiance at the time ran, and long story short, I just didn't fill out my application in time. I should have. We got caught up in our wedding, et cetera, et cetera. We are married now, and basically, no excuses. Just didn't. Just ran out of time. We had other things on our plate.
Sure. Congratulations on your...
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Yes, Jared.
What kind of things do you think Bandera needs, or what kind of improvements, any type of things to attract people in?
Bandera itself attracts people, always has, always will. Things that I did work for the city for a short period of time, probably about 8 months in public works. During my tenure, and I call that very small tenure, there were some issues of, which I understand y'all already got some things in play for the roads and the streets. Bandera has a good old boy feeling. I've noticed that we brag as a town to be the cowboy capital of the world. I would like to see something change on being the friendliest town in the world. Honestly, I've watched people walk into places and be basically scared to talk to anybody. I've met people from all over the world here in the last 2 years. And to make an effort to go up and introduce yourself and say hi and welcome to Bandera, it makes a big difference to our visitors. It's amazing what great people we have in this world that come to see Bandera, Texas, cowboy capital of the world.
Very good. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
What do you see your role as if you were to be on city council?
Honestly, I see my role as a support for the citizens, to try to get a feel of what they want, what they need. Government's not here to support us as city councilmen. We're here to support the citizens of this town, period.
Any other questions, council, or comments? Robert, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Christine, so you get this thing sanitized, wipe down, you're up. Christine Morris.
Good evening, it's Christine Morse. Some of you know me, some of you don't. I wasn't really ready to speak tonight. I was previously on council for a while, and I stepped away for personal reasons. So one of the things is I feel an obligation to come back and fulfill that commitment I had made to the council, to the city, and to the citizens. So that is why I put in the application for the last appointment and did so again when this came up. Same thing as always, I want to support our community. I do that with my work through the Chamber of Commerce, through volunteer work that I do for just about anybody that will ask in the organization. We've always talked about keeping it Western, but there's all the things underneath that still need to be addressed. Infrastructure's always been a big deal. The well's always been a big deal. Roads, which I know we're working on now, so that's great. But there's been a lot of new businesses that have come to town and don't know how to step out and speak to the council. And so through the Chamber of Commerce, we help them understand that that's what they can do. As a realtor here, I've seen a big influx of outsiders coming to buy land and build homes here because now that they can work from home, they don't have to commute anymore. So we're going to start having a lot of input from people that don't know the Bandera way of life, don't know what our history is and how we operate as a community. And I think that I would like to be a part of, with the council, keeping us on the flow of being a great visitor attraction, a great Western town, the things that we have to offer without getting big and crazy and taking too much input from those people that can push us the wrong way.
Questions for Christine?
Yeah, I have same question Darcy had earlier. In fact, it's kind of across the board. Why did you run for election to city council? The most previous.
I was not ready to do it again.
I'm sorry?
I was not ready to do that again with my business. As a realtor, I just didn't want to say that I had the time to do it and then not do it. So when the appointment came up, I went, okay, I'm in a place now that I feel I can contribute again. So.
Okay, thank you.
Darcy?
How long have you lived here in Bandera?
11 years. And mostly, almost all, I lived on Robindale and I lived on 1077, so pretty much been close to the city, and then the last 5 years in town.
Tony?
Same question I gave Robert. Specifically as your role on city council, what do you see that being?
as kind of Robert said, we're here to serve people, and I think that we've done we've done better in the last few years getting businesses to come forward. So I still think that we need to get out and talk to business owners and get them to step up and voice their concerns, and even though they can't vote, but they still need to know they can come in and speak. And I still think that they don't do that because they don't come to the meetings. And I just think that, again, being an advocate for our businesses in town and the residents in town to speak up.
Anything else for council? Thank you, Christine.
Thank you.
Alex Potter?
Hello, I'm Alex. I live here in town and have a business here as well. And I have just seen a lot in the city, and I think there's some things that need to be addressed. Just getting more people in here into these meetings, kind of like what they said also. And yeah, I saw an opportunity to step in and help, and so that's why I'm here now.
Okay. Yes, Darcy?
Are you registered to vote?
Yes,
Where?
in San Antonio, but I live here now, so I'm registered.
For how long? How long have you been here in Bandera?
A year.
So you're not registered here in Bandera though, to vote?
I'm registered in Bear County, not Bandera County.
You three asked great questions each round, and I would just care to kind of have the same opportunity to hear on those three questions from all three,
Yeah.
right? So it was like, why didn't you run, kind of priorities, and then where do you see your role? I think were those them? Yeah.
As far as where I see my role as, hitting on what both they said is, there's a lot of new people in town, there's a lot of businesses in town, and being a liaison for those people in these meetings and making sound, objective decisions that, benefit everybody, regardless of how that goes, and not getting tied up in little things. I mean, there's a lot of big projects going on in town right now, and we don't want to lose sight of those. Also finding a way to communicate with the people, the citizens of what's going on, because we constantly hear things like, oh, why is this taking so long, or what's going on with the roads and this and that, and while things are in work, they're not necessarily, it's not trickling down to the ability to hear it, and I just think it'll give everybody more peace of mind, they'll be able to communicate better and feel better about the things that y'all are doing, and the decisions y'all are making. As far as why I didn't run, I didn't know until there was a vacancy that it would be an option. I wasn't prepared to run. I'm still learning, and I think I spoke with everyone individually here at some point and said that I don't, I'm pretty green when it comes to this, but it's something that I want to learn and that I can learn and that I would do a good job at. So, yeah.
Council, anything further? Okay, Alex, thank you. Okay, item B.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, Tom.
I just have one question. Actually, it's for all, just kind of a general statement. I'm glad we have such great candidates that want to step forward and serve the city. It's a 3-to-1 ratio, so 2 people are not going to be able to get the seat for sure. And what I would like to ask is if you do not get the seat, do you still plan on being involved, and would you be willing to, we have other boards that have frequent vacancies that come available on the days. And so, you stepped up here, do you see yourself still wanting to be involved in other ways?
100%. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, appreciate it. I didn't think of that earlier, so.
Okay. Okay, item B.
If you don't mind when you're speaking, if you want to take your mask off or speak further into the remote, some people are saying they can't understand what council's saying. But it's up to you, you don't have to.
going to pause for a second here while we have technical difficulties. Tony's getting new batteries.
I've already laid it out. Thank you.
Okay, Jill, would you please tell council why 15?
Christine's having a personal issue. She has a dog that is not probably going to make it the rest of the night, so she has to go and deal with that right now.
So we'll go ahead with the resolution. Item B, resolution appointing a resident to serve the remainder of the unexpired term of former council member Palmer. Rebecca.
Well, I too had my hand up before this item came up, but I just wanted to thank the candidates for their commitment to the city and their interest in serving. Robert, I really appreciate your point of view and your business experience, and your time in the Public Works Department gives you a really unique perspective. And with Christine, I felt like her interaction with the business community is a gap that definitely could use a bridge. And then Alex, with your citizen involvement and your eagerness to serve and be more involved in the community, it's all very exciting. But one thing I will say that I did hear something that concerns was when you mentioned that you were registered to vote in Bear County. I was trying to hop on local government code real quick. I don't know that, I think that being registered to vote where you're serving on council is a requirement.
No, this is one of the things that we've looked at several times. It simply says you must be a registered voter, chapter 22.
Thank you.
And that is one of the things that we have always gone, what? But it simply says a registered voter, not in the city.
Okay.
You must dwell in the ward, but we don't have wards, but it simply says you must be a registered voter.
Thank you for clarifying that. Appreciate it.
So as we move on to this resolution, I'm going to entertain a motion that makes a motion to appoint whoever to fulfill the unexpired term. Tony? Not Tony, Dorothy.
I was
I
like,
did it again.
I'd like to make a motion to appoint Christine Morse to fulfill the remainder of Lynn Palmer's vacancy of the seat to City Council.
Thank you. Do you have a second?
Yeah, I'll second that motion.
Rebecca, second. Discussion?
I guess I can give the reason why. Mr. Johnson hasn't lived here very long, and that's the main reason. You do absolutely have a unique view from working for Public Works, and absolutely your background is amazing. The fact that you're registered to vote in a different county strikes, I'm real big into politics, as most people know, and that just really strikes me in the wrong way. I know to run for City Council, not to be appointed to City Council, you have to be a registered voter here, and you should be, and which tells me that you also could not vote for the election. The last election we had, you couldn't actually vote for City Council or for the mayor, and that bothers me a lot personally. So, and you also haven't lived here very long either. So, Ms. Morris has lived here for 11 years, has participated in City Council, although yes, she did leave for personal reasons. I've heard the reason why she's left, and I think that was a very ethical reason why she left, although I don't like people quitting City Council. Once you say you're going to do something, you should fulfill that role, but I do like the reason why she left. I think it was a very ethical reason, and I back that reason, so that's my reason for that nomination.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a motion and a second to appoint Christine Morris to fill the unexpired term until November election of next year. All in favor? Darcy, Rebecca in favor. Opposed? Tony is opposed. Sherry, are you going to abstain from the vote?
No, you asked for opposed, I didn't hear
You're
it, I'm sorry.
opposed. All right, the vote is tied. I vote for Christine Morris to fill that seat.
Thank you, guys.
Robert, thank you.
Appreciate you.
Thank you all, appreciate it.
Thank you, Trey. Alex. Okay, item C.
Got an election in November, as you know.
Come on back. But there are EDC and P&Z seats that need filling.
Absolutely.
Okay, we'll skip item C, the swearing in of the newly appointed council member. Item D is accept the resignation of Jay Horn, city administrator. It's in your packet. Jay, do you have anything you want to say to council?
I've had a blast, I really have, and I'm still here till I leave. I mean, I was gonna keep working just like this my first day, so, but thank y'all very much. I've had a good time here, I've enjoyed everybody, and, I wish nothing but the best for Bandera.
Thank you, Jay.
Thanks, Jay. Yeah, we've been working to type some loose ends there in the office, and it's going to be a smooth transition. I need a motion to accept that resignation. Jerry?
I make a motion, I move to accept the resignation of Jay Horry.
Accept effective December the 15th.
I'm sorry?
Effective December the 15th.
Yes.
Second?
Rebecca, second. Discussion? All in favor? All in favor, none opposed. Item B is an update from L&B Engineering on the wastewater treatment plant project. Do we have them on?
We do. Derek, are you speaking or do I need to unmute somebody else? Hang on 1 second, Derek, hang on. Go ahead and give us a test.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Is that better? Good evening, Mayor and Council. We've got here with LNB Temple Williamson, one of our water treatment engineers, put together a little study of the wastewater treatment plant, and I'll turn it over to him and let him give the executive summary, and we'll, of course, any questions on we have, we'll be glad to answer. Gentlemen?
Yes, thank you, Derek. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, very well.
Perfect, thank you. All right, so a little background on the purpose of this study. In 2016, TCQ did an inspection of the Bandera wastewater plant and noted that it was in the floodplain. TCQ permit requirements that mean that the outside of the floodplain, not only was it in the floodplain, but it's in the regulatory floodway. So the fact that it's in the floodway means you're in the conveyance zone. So we did a feasibility study to look at the possibility of relocating that plant to a new location where it's no longer in the regulatory floodway. We also, at that time, looked at was it feasible to leave it in that location. It was not due to the impacts that you would have and the ability to have to raise it up in that location. So through that, we looked at different alternatives as far as technologies, as far as the different types of plants, extended aeration, sequence back reactor, or the type of plant that is currently at your oxidation stage. From there, we looked at the TCQ requirements for siting, as far as their requirements, as far as buffers that you would need to have for a plant, as far as distance from public wells, buffers from private wells, and then setbacks within the fence, which gave us an ultimate size for a new plant, which we estimated to be 4 to 5 acres needed for a new plant. Going into the alternative analysis, we looked at 4 sites. Is it possible for me to share the screen?
No,
Okay, got it.
we're not sitting.
Well, we would appreciate that, sorry.
Sure.
They can send it to us.
I'll just speak to the locations of the, alternate sites. Again, 4 sites, one to the southeast of the existing site, just on the other side of the Medina River. The other site, alternate 2, was, south of town on the other side of the Medina River, in that same corridor across from, the park. A bit further upstream. Then site 3 was further east of town, along Bottle Spring Road. And then the 4th site was east of town along Highway 16, which would be north of the existing plant. We put together a cost estimate for the different options. All told, it would be $8 million for a new plant. Then with the land acquisition and the conveyance to the new site, for the lowest cost option, it was approximately $13.6 million. Overview. Stand by for any questions you may have.
Okay, just 1 second.
So, I'm sorry, if I heard you right, the 13.6 included the land acquisition and conveyance.
That is correct.
Thank you.
I think Tony had a question earlier. Tony, did you want to say something?
I was just gonna say that he could share his screen, so it will be on the Zoom video that we, as council, can reference, as well as those watching. So I thought it was a good idea that if he shared.
Yeah, one of the things I really wanted to catch y'all up on is, where are we on the application process? Temple, Derek?
Yes, it has been submitted. It's back with the under review. We should know something about that. I believe that they expect it something in March is when they start making those decisions.
And that is for the GLO.
That's a GLO,
CDBG.
yes.
What that is it's a program that's CDBG, MIT, which are mitigation dollars, flood mitigation dollars. So it's the CDBG MIT program. It's administered through the state GLO, which is the General Land Office. And so we submitted an application, competitive applications with other communities that have other mitigation dollar projects. And it's a process where they'll review that. And sometime early next year, when they'll probably release or give us some information on what the selections will be.
And for the information of new council members, this is a grant with a 1% match, meaning in round numbers, if we get $10 million, we only owe $100,000 in our match, and so that's quite doable. It's a great opportunity. Rebecca?
Hi, Derek, and sorry, what was the other gentleman's name? Temple.
Temple Williamson.
Okay, hi. My question goes back to the sites, and specifically I'm curious about discharge. They're different geographical sites, so what do you anticipate doing with the discharge?
Can you please repeat the question? I had a hard time.
Yeah, I'm curious about the discharge from the water treatment facility.
Yes, the current site would have to be decommissioned.
No.
Which is included in that cost estimate.
Temple, she asked the question, what would we do with the discharge for a plant at other locations?
You have a number of options. You could do land application, or you could, as the current plant discharges to the Medina River, you could also discharge to the Medina River.
Question.
All of these sites are
Yeah.
within, enough general location that they would still discharge to the Medina River.
Okay, so that's really the reason that I brought up this question, and we may have another opportunity down the road as we discuss in more detail the impacts of each of these potential sites. But I don't know personally about recreating what we have right now with the discharge going into the river, that I would want to apply for that type of permit with TCEQ. And I don't know if you're aware that we are on the Texas Water Development Board 10 or 20-year plan for a aquifer, an ASR project, aquifer storage and recharge. So I would be really curious to see the hydrological studies that show some of that impact, and then where potentially we could do an ASR project combined with this one, because we could benefit from potential funding opportunities by tying the projects together. So I think it behooves us to look into the future, consider not putting that water in our river, and looking at other low impact development methods. So thank you.
Tony?
I'm going to put you on the spot just for a second, but what impact to the price that you estimated would it be to store the treated water and have an opportunity to sell it, to use it like an income to the local golf courses or other opportunities like that?
So we did try to select sites where reuse would be a possibility, either for city use or to, surrounding golf courses. The site 3, the Bottle Springs Road, is near the Flying L package plant, which they have the golf courses supply there. So those are options.
And it wouldn't impact the price that much?
Yeah.
The overall project would?
I will say that, we could, when we put this little feasibility study together, we looked at, when Temple says sites, we didn't go out there and pick, a certain parcel. And, we looked at kind of generalized areas, because we don't know, once you start talking with landowners and folks and trying to identify that particular spot, so we kind of looked at more areas, those 4 areas, because the biggest cost associated with a general area is conveyance of the current, sewage flow plant from where it goes down to the existing plant, and also the conveyance of whatever your discharge stream is. We could definitely, I hear what y'all are saying, the ASR, is something that's an option. Kerrville does it, where you put it back, treat it, you create a bubble in the ground, and reuse is definitely something that you want to look at.
My question.
All things can be explored, but all those different things are more dollars, are more dollars that you have to add to the project or be able to come up with through some kind of mechanism. So that's
Right.
what we're adding that in to what the cost, what the overall total cost would be.
That was my question, Derek. I was just wondering if you happen to know if it was a big impact. I just feel like we have locally in our rural area, we have a lot of opportunities to use that water. We have farming, we go through droughts, we have, golf courses, we have other commercial facilities that could probably use the water and we could use the money. So, if we could figure out how to make that return on investment, that would, if it was a minimal investment, I think the return long run environmentally as well as economically, it might be a wise choice.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this may, I can't hear all this real well,
Hang on.
but this may be somewhat related to Tony's question. But for me, it boils down to what are the alternative technologies that are available today and the cost behind them. that would be associated with that? And I would be surprised if you could answer that right now, but go for it.
Well, I don't know that I heard the question. Dimple, did you hear that? I mean, it's kind of, we can hear good on this end of the table, but the sound gets a little distorted on that end. Apologize for that. Could you repeat that?
Sure. What are the alternative technologies that are available today? And what would be the associated costs with those technologies?
Yeah, so we did look at 3 different alternative technologies as far as the different types of plant. Typically the newer technologies are going to have a little bit higher operating costs versus some of the more traditional methods. So there are some trade-offs.
Jerry?
I think that would be crucial, critical, to know what those costs would be, not just kind of out there.
Well, I think since they weren't prepared for that question tonight, perhaps we'll reschedule another update soon, give them a chance to answer those questions and give us a little bit more about the discharge situation and the different locations. A particular location that hasn't been explored yet, has it, Dimple?
Pardon me again, I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
At this point, there has not been a specific location for this plant that has been.
No, other than we gave a recommendation in the study, and again, that was based on cost.
Okay, thank you. Jerry?
Just to clarify, so there's not one particular parcel that's like the #1 recommendation out of the 4.
The feasibility study has 4 different locations.
Right.
Yeah, and those are the 4 that are potential sites.
But is there one out of those 4 sites that is more?
Well, they have, they're ranked 1, 2, 3, and 4. I don't remember off the top of my head which is #1.
So yes, to answer your question, we did have a recommended site, which is the closest site to the existing plant, which reduces the conveyance cost. So, and again, as Derek said, those are a general area. It isn't an exact address.
Clarification again, so that #1 site is the one southeast of the existing plant?
Yes, sir. It's speaking in generalities, it's on the other side of the river from the existing plant.
Thank you.
At the flood.
Rebecca, you have another question?
No, I'm good, I got one.
I'll tell you what, why don't we schedule another update when we have visual available, and we'll get that worked up, if that's all right with council, unless you have other questions for tonight. Yes, Rebecca?
I do. In terms of our timeline for the project coupled with the grant, what is your estimate on when we need to nail down a project more specifically? And a location and everything, like the type of plant, where it's going to be, how we're going to discharge, how much time do we have to work these details out with the grant timeline? Do we know?
What would the grant timeline, what would be a general timeline? I guess you're asking specifically, Councilwoman Gibson, what would be the timelines where you would need to identify a site and then negotiate, acquisition or whatever of that particular site or location? Is that your question?
Yes.
Okay. Dimple, on the grant projects, I guess if we went into feasibility phase study to identify and home in and look at a site, I guess we're probably talking about, I would say, the first 12 months of the project.
Agreed.
And then there is some flexibility there. I mean, there's other things you're going to be doing, jointly or kind of simultaneously with that. But once you identify a particular location, the process to do that and to acquire the property
all of the four potential general areas that you named, I'm guessing they're not all within the city limits, so this would require MOU from other taxing entities whose jurisdiction we're lying in? Or the project will occur in, or are they all in the city limits?
They're not all in the city,
Okay.
particular number
They're outside the city limits.
Okay, that was it, thank you.
Anything further? Okay, Temple Derek, I will contact, or Jane, somebody will contact you. We'll get something set up, or give you some visual of, get the answer to these different methods of the discharge. I like the one pumping it back into the aquifer myself, but that's what I would want to take. Anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, probably what would be, what I'd recommend is you probably just need to come there and be prepared, be prepared for some exhibits and some larger maps and do it in person, so.
Okay.
Okay, sorry, I promised
Okay,
I'll
okay.
stop after this. Derek, I realize that with COVID, it might not be an option to visit other facilities, but if you have any to recommend that any of us visit in terms of what they're doing and different types of plants with newer technologies, I would appreciate that. If you could just shoot a list over, if you're aware of good examples to go and visit.
Yeah, I think what we'll do is, Councilwoman, at the next presentation, we'll go into, we didn't think y'all were gonna wanna go into that much depth on the technical side, but we can be prepared to go into depth on the different types of plants, the technical, some of the new technologies, the requirements for the effluent, and kind of all that. I mean, those are kind of stuff that we kind of looked at, and we have reference to that in the report. So we can go into more detail on the technical side, the effluent, the water quality, the requirements for TCQ, etc. So we'll be prepared to kind of delve into that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Derek. We'll be in touch. Thanks, Temple.
Thank y'all.
Okay. Item F, update the status from Ben Rosenberg, financial advisor regarding the fifth application. Fifth is the Texas Water Development Board flood infrastructure plan project.
All right. Good to see everybody again. Take this off for a minute so I can breathe a little bit. Thanks for having me out tonight. My name's Ben Rosenberg. I'm with U.S. Capital Advisors. You were hired a few years back as your financial advisor to help with the water loan that we did back in 2018 for the water improvements. And then this project started. I'll just give you a little background. So we'll go through this page by page, but we're not going to read every line of every page, but just thought I'd go into a little project background and how this thing started. And I'm just going to read this paragraph. I think it's why we're here today. In 2019, the Texas legislature created the Flood Infrastructure Fund, or FIF, as the mayor mentioned it, to provide funding for flood mitigation projects. This was after Harvey. I think, remember the bad flooding that happened across the state in different areas. So the purpose of the fifth, is outlined in the Senate Bill 7 of the 86th legislature, was to assist in financing drainage, flood mitigation, and flood control projects. As required by law, the fifth would be approved by Texas voters, and on November 5th, 2019, they approved Proposition 8, the constitutional amendment providing for the creation of the fifth. In conjunction with that amendment, the legislature made a one-time transfer of $793 million from the Economic Stabilization Fund to the fifth through Senate Bill 500. So they took that money out of the rainy day fund, which probably right now they wish they hadn't because of COVID, but they did, and the voters approved it. And then on March 16th of this year, they started working on this plan. They opened solicitations for applications. Applications were due June 15th, and then they compiled the list, and I have a summary of that. They received 286 applications for a total of $2.3 billion this $786,793 million, they can broker that and give little pieces to, and borrow some additional money to seed this $2.3 billion in projects. So then if you look on page 5, I just showed the ranking, and the city's project came in ranked 111th. The project is listed as drainage improvements for a total of $8.2 million. Of the $8.2 million, we qualify for $3.7 million of free money grants, or grant, and $4.5 million of a zero interest loan. So for an $8 million project, only having to pay back $4.5 million is a great deal at zero interest. So not sure we would get a better time or a better deal from the Water Development Board than that right there. Now, and then page 6 just shows all the different projects, and there's a total of $2.3 billion that was allocated or requested. So at this time, ideally, again, the engineers were here with the map, and you could see exactly what it is you're going to get, or what's in that $8.2 million. I don't know if Derek, if they're still on the line or not, but because then we'll talk about the financing of the project going forward. Derek, are you still there?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, he's there, hold on a second, I gotta unmute him. Derek? Hang on one second, we'll turn you up. Did you hear Ben's question?
I did not hear Ben's question.
Or just take
Derek, just in general terms, the $8.2 million project, which is listed as drainage improvements, what are they gonna, what's included in that project for the city, for the $8.2 million?
You want me to give just a basic overview of the project? Some of the drainage along the creek there through town that goes right by City Hall, basically starting down there on Maple Street near the RV park, looking at improving the conveyance capacity of that thing to reduce flooding and flood impacts to the adjoining property owners. Basically, all the way up to a point just right there at Pecan Street. Then we have along Maple Street there in front of the park. We have improving drainage and also at the same time improving the street to provide a little better access and a little more maybe parking space on the street and fix that area up and improve all the drainage in there with how it flows over, all the drainage that comes down the hill there. And it runs across into the park and creates erosion problems to alleviate those problems. And then also some riparian, the biggest green part, although all the different components have some green component to it, but the biggest single green component would be the riparian repair areas to enhance the bank of the river and improve the park. And also the erosion measures, countermeasures to protect the banks there would all be part of the project and included all together as one.
Y'all get that? And y'all familiar with all the streets and parts of town. So that's sort of where we're at today. So the state came up with a plan to finance flood improvements across the state. They opened up this, what they're calling this 5th program. They asked for application, we put in a bridge application, we got invited to apply. And then I think on page 6 it showed they had a team together, engineers, finance, and city folks, and Bill Moriarty, which is the consulting engineer. And we put in the application in October. Since that time, we've been asked a lot of questions and clarifications on how we're going to afford it, and engineering questions. And so we're just at that point now, we're waiting for the Water Development Board to take it to their board to approve it. I'd send a note to the folks there this week to find out when that was. I haven't heard back from them. I'm assuming it's going to maybe be in January. I'm not sure.
I actually heard from them, and they have approved it already. Their board has approved it.
They approved the program, the whole program, but not the specific loan commitment for the city of Bandera.
Okay, gotcha.
So what happens of these 285 different cities and programs had to put in a detailed application, which is about 30 pages long. And then they evaluate each of those independently. Affordability, they did preliminary approval of the overall project, and they have to go by and individually take each one of those 285 cities back to the board for approval and loan commitment. Okay, so they haven't done that yet. And they also have these in categories, 4 different categories, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Let's see what's on the list here. We're in category 2, which isn't as high priority as categories 1 and 4. And so I'm not sure where we're going to have those 205, when we're going to go to their board for approval. Now I have a timetable in the back, assuming they go in January, what that would mean to us. But I didn't get a commitment from them on when they're going to take it to their board for the city of Bandera's project. So that's what overall the project, how much it costs, and then my job as financial advisor is to look at your financials and say, okay, how can we afford it, right? Or can we afford it? Because even though it's $3.5 million of free money, it's a $4.5 million loan. And even though it's 0 interest, you still got to pay $4.5 million back. So page 9 is just that $8.2 million in the Water Development Board required format, and it's you see $7 million as construction and services and fees are the balance. Most of all is just due to this actual construction. And then so I dug into the analysis of the city. So I'm starting on page 10. The city has 2 major funds, the general fund and the water and sewer proprietary fund. And I put together the 5-year history to look at your financials to see it doesn't do us any good to get a loan if we can't pay it back. So we looked at the general fund, and your general fund is healthy for the last 5 years, consistently making excess revenues over expenditures, and also at the bottom, the financial folks, underwriters, people who lend money want to make sure that you have at least 3 to 4 months of operating reserve in your what they call unassigned fund balance. You have well over that, you have 130%. So your general fund looks good. You have a nice company. Again, this is up to September 19 is the last audit. So I'm dealing with 1 year behind. But this is the same numbers that they look at because they don't look at all the numbers. But so the general fund is very healthy. And then we look at the water and sewer fund. Also, income operations, it has been positive every year. It's just not big numbers. We don't have a lot of revenue. Total revenue of $1.5 million. So look at that 5-year history, and then on page 12, we look at, they allow you to sort of add back depreciation as a non-cash expense. Look at your total net revenues from your water and sewer system. And we're going to use this last number, $206,531. You'll see that when we get to that in a minute. And just one note, and we'll get to this later on, is Water Development Board is looking for a cash reserve in your water and sewer fund of about a 30-day operating reserve. And so I'll talk to some questions that came up from them about your financials that we've addressed, and I'm going to make a proposal to you for consideration at one of your future council meetings. So that's looking at your overall revenue base, your general fund, your water and sewer fund revenues. And so then the next question is, well, what does $4.5 million cost us on an annual basis if we borrow the money? And so we'll allow you to look at 30 years at 0 interest, and your payment's about $155,000, $160,000. They don't do that in $5,000 increments, that's why it's off.
Repeat that, please.
On page 13 is the sound. So to borrow $4.5 million for 30 years, and they'll allow you to go 30 years with 0 interest, is approximately $155,000 to $160,000. They normally do those in $5,000 increments. That's why it's either $155,000 or $160,000 per year. Okay. So all right. So now how does that fit into your overall scheme? So here's the big pro forma on page 14, and this is analysis that they use to see if you can delineate the money. So in the top left corner, you have there's that $206,000, your net revenues from your operating water and sewer fund. See at the top left. And then right below that is your total property values. You currently have an INS tax that you've implemented the last couple of years, so approximately almost 7 cents. And those two, that brings in about $61,000. And so the two numbers together, the 206 and the $61,000, equal approximately $268,000 going forward. And that, they just use that, they don't do any increases or just sort of show that going forward as a point in time. And before you can take on any new debt, you got to consider your old debt. So the 2018 loan is that middle column, less existing debt, which is about 145,000, 146, 47,000. That leaves about 125,000 left over for new debt. Added the new debt, which is about 155,000, which shows we're going to be short about $38,000 and some change. Now, which based on your number of accounts is about less than $3, a little over $3 a month per account. So we've talked about internally that could be financed with a drainage improvement fee, $3 per account, and you would cover that loan. And as long as you told the water development board you would raise that fee, they'll probably make it as a loan if you're willing, if you want to do it. So but that's going to strike you out for the next 30 years. But it's a heck of an opportunity to get $8.5 million of work or $8.2 million worth of work for $4.5 million at zero interest. No decisions have to be made tonight. This is really just for information. So, but sure, question.
If approved, once approved, how long do you have to start utilizing those funds? I mean, can you hold off for a year or two before you start even taking advantage of it?
Because this is all so much free money, once they approve the loan, they're going to ask you to close on your loan within 6 months. 4 to 6. And then they'll give you a year to close on the loan. And then once you close on the loan, you're supposed to spend the money within about 3 years.
And what if you don't?
Then, well, there's no, well, the hand that comes out of the sky is the compliance people at the Water Development Board. Since you're not paying, there's also IRS regulations because you're borrowing taxes in money, but since you're not paying any interest, there's still regulations, compliance regulations that you're supposed to spend it within 3 years.
So in simple terms,
The Water Development Board is going to tell you you need to spend the money within 3 years. And since they're
and
giving
if
you
you
the money.
don't, and what happens if you don't?
You're in violation of your agreement. You're in violation of your agreement with the Water Development Board.
He's asking then what
I mean, is there
happens if you
fines,
don't
penalties?
spend the money in the time frame.
Is it just a matter of,
They're going to highly encourage you to keep doing it. To my knowledge, there's not fines, and things like TCQ has fines and penalties for if you have code violations of water and sewers, if you're violating or polluting the water, they have violations and penalties. They just want you to
We
fix
don't want to
it.
make
So these
that
guys just encourage you to keep spending the money and finish the project.
And Jerry, it's not just all chunked into the bank at one time.
right?
It's a reimbursement, not a reimbursement, but it's a,
So they do put it in the bank all at one time.
huh?
They do put it in the bank all at one time.
They didn't on the Texas Board of Government, or something, did they?
They put in the money all at one time. It's an escrow account. You don't spend it all
Yeah,
at
we
once.
have to get it from Amity in order to,
And you have to, as you submit invoices, then
right, it's not in our bank account, let's put it that way.
it's in the bank.
So are you paying on that full amount that's deposited?
Well, luckily, you're not paying any interest.
Right,
You would be paying
what's
interest.
that?
You're not paying any interest. So,
Oh, I understand that, but will you be paying on the full debt,
so
whether you're using the money or not?
right. So what they would do is they'd set this amortization schedule for 30 years. If you had money, so at the end of the project, you're done. You got $1 million left over.
I understand that. What I'm asking is, you are paying on the full amount then, correct? You're amortizing that full amount over 30 years, and you're paying from the get-go, correct? Okay.
Correct. And if you did have money left over, you could pay it back. You could give it back. It would come off the back end, so it wouldn't change your amortization schedule. So like a house.
I understand.
Okay, the thing I wanted to bring up to you guys is that we're about to bite off a lot of financial obligation for our city, our residents. I want you to, we've still got some decisions to make. We're going to move forward. Will we impose a drainage fee? I don't want to get back into another INS tax. I'm going to bring that up. I want this to be out of reserves or somewhere, because I don't want it to go, I don't have to come out of general fund because of the nature of the project. But I just don't want to have to do another INS tax. Tony?
So, if I understand it right, $3 per account.
$336. Yeah.
$3 fee per utility account per month for 30 years. So that takes some of the burden off of the actual citizens, because some of those accounts are commercial accounts. So it would be, it would be property owners, not just people that live here. And so some of those, we've talked about this before, to some degree, retailers, can compensate that because, they can get their overhead. We don't want to price them out of business, I know that, but this, by doing it this way, it distributes, it's a use tax, or it's a use fee for people that are using utilities in that department.
Well, that's a discussion for another day. I just wanted to make sure that y'all know what
I mean,
I'm into.
I was correct in the fact that it said citizens, and it's not
Yeah.
just the citizens, it's bigger than the 877 people. It's, thank you.
And it's $160,000 a year. I believe you said a month. But it's a year, so it's bad enough as it is, don't make it even worse.
My comment was going to be related to the potential that our dollar amount drops from 8.5 million because, when this project was submitted and the two bigger ticket items were kind of added on to the erosion and riparian project that was kind of the catalyst for this whole grant, these other two bigger projects were added on. And they were put together really quickly, and it's possible at the very least that the price tag could come down, that the project could be revised. And so we would be looking at less money a year, a smaller total. It's a possibility anyway. Nothing's been committed to at this point, and everything was super preliminary, including the dollar figures. And I don't want to say they were inflated, but we were like, let's get this in there for everything we could possibly get it in for to cover these projects in a really short period of time for those dollar amounts. So
Tony had a hand up first, right?
I didn't know if Ben had a response to
Oh,
our input from.
I do want to add too, right, we had a deadline to put in the application, we said, let's put this in and see what happens. And so we put in for the full 8.2 million, they came back with 45% grant. So if you reduce that to 5 million, then they would still do that 45% grant. So you can't just say, I just want the free money and
Right.
I don't want the loan. They're going to do the same split.
It's a
So
ratio, but the total price
you
tag
could
could come
definitely
down.
reduce it. It could be even less than 8.2.
Right.
That was my question.
Right.
It was just that they're going to keep that same percentage grant and loan.
So hypothetical. So we did 8.5, we put together the $3 per account for 30 years every month. We get into it and we decide we have other urgent matters. We have that money in the bank, we've already started paying the $160 per year, the money's left over. Then if we choose not to do that, we also could choose no longer to charge that $3 account, make that $3 per account because we've decided maybe not to do the last phase of the project. Because if we plan it as a phase, and we decide something in our town gets to be more crucial when we're at the end of phase 2, and we decide no longer to charge that $3 and say, okay, here's our money back. We need to focus on something else. That sounds like it's an option. It's a 0% interest. It doesn't sound like we're not paying any interest, we're not paying any penalties. We're just not using the money and we're giving it back. Because we put on more than we could shoot.
Right, and let's not focus so much on the 336 as a given amount. Let's look at page 12 again, which shows your net revenues. We show the unaudited numbers for 2020. And these are just revenue expense numbers that have been audited. If that is the audited number 363 for 2020, then you don't have any shortfall. You don't have to do any increase. So that was just at that point in time. The last audit numbers we had showed 206,000. it's fluctuates. So what you're telling the water and board is, we're gonna make this payment, and we're gonna set rates to cover your payment. And so that's on a year-by-year basis. And then, if you look at page 13, the debt service, what they allow you to do is if we would close the loan in 2021 and allow a year for construction, you don't have to pay back till a year from construction is over. So notice, I don't have a payment until 2023. So the 336 a month per account is just math. What the shortfall showed with a 2019 audited number, paying in 2023 the first year. So that was just a shortfall based on the math. It's not saying you're going to do a 336 a month increase tomorrow, or even next year, or this year. It could be within, you're just going to tell the water development board that based on our numbers, we think we can afford it. If we're short, if that's our number at the beginning of the year, and we're short, then we'll have an increase to cover the debt payment. That's what you'd be committing to the water development. It's not necessarily $3 guaranteed at $3.36 a month per increase. So I'm not advocating that right today. That's just the numbers show today, based on the last audit numbers. If that makes sense.
Go ahead, Darcy.
Are there any other feasible options besides increasing amounts on our citizens? Because sitting on the other side of this table and you tell me, hey Jane, you're gonna suck it up and pay $3.36. I'm going, no sucker, I don't wanna pay $3.36. You sat there and made that decision. I don't really care about the drainage behind City Hall. You know, I don't wanna pay it because y'all just increased my stuff 2 years ago. I'm sick of this. Because sitting on the other side of the table, that's exactly what I'd be thinking. So, I mean, there's got to be something else. And I know you're saying that the 336 is not set in stone, but, you know, you can't tell me that there's not something else we can do besides sit there and put 336 on our, and, you know, even on the business owners. But, you know, there's got to be another way.
Well, we're looking at all your revenue numbers, looking at property taxes as an option, and the instrument that we would recommend would be a certificate of obligation, which allows you to pay it from property taxes or revenue. So whatever source of revenue you can come up with. It could be a hotel motel tax. It goes in the general revenue of the city. So, I mean, here's all your revenue items. You know, you can also cut costs and not have an increase. This is, and we're only 30,000 short. So, I mean, you know, but you can reduce the project.
How much are we paying you?
How much are you paying me? It's on that 8.2 million. It's in there. So you can reduce the overall project. You can, if your audit numbers come in for 2020, 30,000 higher than the 206, it would show you would have to have an increase at all. So you have to put in the application at some point in time and then use the most recent audit numbers, and that's the way it's shown. And you're sort of doing audit numbers behind, the revenue projections forward. The best thing for you guys, though, one, is the free money and the zero interest. So it doesn't really matter when we close. We don't have interest. We're not concerned that the rates are going to go up, so there's no pressure to do this sooner than later. It's just because they're giving you free money. Once they approve the loan, they're going to want you to close or issue the debt within about 4 to 6 months, and then start spending it within 3 years. That's the requirements they're going to have.
Anything else for Ben?
I'll have some more.
Oh, you're, oh, never mind, Ben's not over that.
That's through page 14. So starting on 15, this is just one thing I want to, again, this is based on 2019 numbers. And all they have to look at is your audit. So look at your and this is mainly going to be paid from water and sewer. They say, look at your water and sewer fund, and they said, you don't have any cash in your water and sewer fund. And it's been decreasing for the last 5 years. Why is that? So we looked at your general fund, hey, you got $600,000 cash, $1 million in investments, general unassigned fund balance of $1.7 million. That's as of 19. But if you look at page 17, at the bottom, the proprietary fund shows $311 in water and sewer fund operating cash. And so we tried to explain that in a small city, the general fund and the water and sewer fund are almost interoperable. The general fund pays for some general fund water and sewer expenditures, and it's all the same people doing the work and, you know, that type of thing. And so I said, but look on page 18, your balance has gone down from 15 to 2019, and they would like, remember I said in the prior page, no 30-day operating, they would like at least about $117,000 of cash in the water and sewer fund for operation, just as a recommendation. But for another city, they required that as a reserve fund. And so I asked them, is there any way we can not have that requirement, since you have all this cash in the general fund? We talked to the auditor, the auditor said, well, the city's spent about $1.7 million in capital improvements and repairs over the last 5 years and paid for it out of cash. So you could have borrowed the money and only had kept the cash, but you paid as you go. So you're being penalized now. They're asking, you know, why you spent all that money? Because we didn't want to borrow the money. We paid for these. So I requested to the water development board, what if we would transfer city unassigned fund balance in general fund can be used for any lawful purpose. Lawful purpose could be transferred to the water and sewer fund so if the city would consider doing that, I would recommend doing that pretty soon, like next council meeting, maybe $150,000 or $150,000. Then they would not put this reserve requirement on the city going forward for the next 30 years.
Sorry, may I ask a quick clarification?
Yes.
You're suggesting that we go ahead and consider a budget transfer to a new line item called?
It's not necessarily a budget, it's
No?
cash. It's just taking
Oh.
it. So again, these are 19 numbers, but if you look at right now, if you look at your general fund, this is the 19. On page, my 16 on the bottom.
Yeah.
Cash and investments, you have almost $1.7 million in cash in the general fund. And on that line item of unassigned fund balance, $1.7 million, $150,000 of that money. Now that's different than the 2020 numbers not known yet. But it's somewhere close to that, and transfer that to the water and sewer fund.
Okay.
Operating cash account. So it's just actually moving cash. So something will need to be done as a council action, because you have to move or designate. You did something similar to the street program, right? You took money out and designated some money for street repairs. This is really just designating some of that money for the water and sewer operating fund.
Okay.
And the council needs to do that. And if you do that, they won't put this requirement saying, we're going to require you to have $117,000 in a restricted cash account for the next 30 years. We don't want that.
Do we have some sort of memo from do you have some kind of memo from TWDB to that effect?
Just some email traffic back and forth between
Okay.
us and them.
Just for the record? Okay.
Yeah. They didn't say specific amount. I'm just saying, if they're looking for 117, and we've been up as high as 330, 150,000 is probably a good round number. If it's satisfying them, we're going to keep that city, the city is going to keep operating cash in the water and sewer fund going forward.
Okay.
On your terms, not their terms. Because they require from other cities to put it in a restricted cash account for the next 30 years. I said, I don't want that. And they came up, like right before yours came up, and we fought for this for 2 or 3 weeks. So that's going to be a requirement.
But that would go on for the remainder of the loan, that balance would need to be maintained more or less.
You're just going to need to keep cognizant of keeping cash in, not so much on the general fund, make sure you have some cash in the water and sewer fund.
This is why I asked specifically about a record about it, that it's in the file with the whole program for future information, for continuity, for future employees or council members or what have you, that understand this element of the obligation.
Well, that would be in what we're trying to do is avoid them requiring us to have this amount of money in our contract, because that's where it would be. If we could show this, and as you say, we continue to keep that balance up. Where it all went kind of south was when we decided to do the pooled cash, the consolidated cash thing, and that's when everything, you'll see in 2018, everything went into one pot. So we no longer had a balance for general and a balance for proprietary. It all went together, but it still is, if it makes any sense to you, it still is, this comes from utility and this comes from the general fund. But remember too, when you're looking at this, that on page 16, we have allocated 500,000 of the 615,000 to our street project. So in reality, that 600,000 is not available because that is year one of our 500,000. That is year one of our street project. But again, it's allocated. It's not physically moved anywhere yet. It's in a CIP, but it's not physically moved anywhere.
Well, and this is last year's,
Right.
and this is last year's numbers, yeah.
Right. So basically, we'd be looking at our CDs at the next meeting and having to put those into our cash account to cover this particular shortfall.
And I think we've alluded to, but I would like to specifically hear, do we have to keep that amount of money in that account, or can it?
If we can do council action and move the money. Now see, the audit, they're gonna start the audit in February, I think they said, the 2020 audit. So, and that's gonna be as of 9/30 of 20. The cash won't be there. I don't know what the cash is gonna be. It won't be $311, but it won't be the 150 that we need. But with this council action showing them, they won't, so what they do, their board approves a resolution committing the money to you. And in this other city, they put a stipulation in that saying that you have to have this money in there for 30 years. If we can get them not to have that, then every now and then somebody from their compliance department might call you and say, we saw your audit, because you have to send them your audit every year, and you're getting a little low on your balance. You need to get it back up again. But it's not a requirement.
Gotcha.
So that's what we're trying to do, is keep it from being a requirement. Yes, they could call you anytime and say, but as long as you're making your payments, that's the main thing they want to know.
Sorry. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, last thing I have to go over is the timetable. So if they, so right now, no action tonight. So I just want to understand the whole process where we are today. We're waiting for them to say, okay, we're ready to take this to the board. They're not going to make December, so if they have 2 meetings, I think, in January. So down the middle of the page there in yellow, if their board approves the loan funding for the city on the January 28th meeting, then we have to come back and then we start the debt issuance process. So that for the next meeting would be February 4th, and we would do the council would consider and approve a notice of intent to issue certificates of obligation. So now you have an instrument. Instruments that are available to cities are general obligation bonds. Those require a vote. We don't have time to do a vote, May and November. A certificate of obligation doesn't require a vote, but it does require a notice in the paper for 2 consecutive weeks and 45 days in the period waiting. And the citizens have it, and if the citizens garner 5% of the registered voters, if they would garner a petition, they can require you to take this expenditure to a vote. It doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. If that does not happen, then 45 days later, no sooner than 45 days later, so look at the calendar, April 1st, we'll be back, and that's when we would actually approve the loan. Council would commit to borrowing the money in April. That's if they approve it in January. There's no interest, so you don't have to worry about that, but at that time, April, you would commit to borrowing the money, and it takes about 30 days to close the loan after that, and you have your money in May. So that's the time they will come back. I'll be back here 2 more times. One, to start the debt issuance process, let the citizens know our intent is to borrow this money, and these are the terms. This is how much we're going to borrow, not to exceed, these are the terms. And put a notice in the paper, wait 45 days, post it on the website. And if you don't get a petition, then April 1st, we'll be back and you approve, you would commit to borrowing the money in April. And between now and then, you could reduce the amount. You can't go higher than 8.2, but you could go lower. You have time to reduce the amount, and then all those numbers will change. Okay.
Ben, for the December 7th meeting, where do you get the language for this resolution?
So I would think the city attorney and the bond attorney can also help you with that. The team of the bond attorney. City council resolution authorizing use of unassigned fund balance for other purposes, and that's, that, they can do that. If not the bond attorney or city attorney.
Well, we had already emailed him and asked him, you know, and he said, yeah, no problem, so we'll just
Okay.
follow through on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben.
Okay, any other questions? Sorry for so long. I wanted to take you all through that, being so long. But, yeah, any other questions on Elizabeth?
Thank you.
Again, I appreciate it. When I start talking to council about numbers, I start talking in a language that, you know, we don't understand, and I don't even understand what I'm saying half the time, but I know what I'm saying. But they had an opportunity to ask you questions, I appreciate that.
All right, stay well, everybody. Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Be safe.
Be safe, my God. Okay, item G. A resolution designating an official newspaper of the city of Bandera for statutory. Darcy.
I'd like to make a motion that we designate the Bandera Bulletin, sorry. I'd like to make a motion that we designate the Bandera Bulletin as our official newspaper.
Second. Discussion?
Just thank you for all the backup information regarding this decision. Appreciate it. It was helpful.
All in favor? Tony, Jerry, Darcy, Rebecca in favor. All opposed? No one opposed. All in favor passes. Bring your newspaper.
Thank you.
Item H is a resolution amending the city of Bandera personnel policy to include a compensatory time off policy. Jill, there's a lot of information on this. Do you want to talk to council about it? Because it is an HR matter.
Last time we spoke, there were some questions about what other cities our size did, and if they had policies. So what I did was I reached out to some other cities, and I got their information and put that in the package for you, just to kind of see what other cities do. The attorneys are who put this particular policy together with the number of hours that most of their cities give for compensatory or flex time, whatever, however you want to call it. So, that's pretty much really all I have. The resolution that goes along with it, is just standard language, the actual item that's attached to it, that can be amended if you want to make any changes to it. You can still pass the resolution, I can make the changes to the amendments that go with it. So if you say, 40 hours instead of, I don't even really know what it says, but, so we can make changes to the amendment that goes with the resolution. But the resolution itself is standard language. Questions?
Well, I just wanted to point out that 3.03.03, no overtime compensation for exempt. Well, remember we recently made 3 employees, exempt employees.
Positions.
But
Positions.
positions, positions, correct. And so this goes on to say certain executive, administrative, and professional employees are exempt from overtime provisions of the FLSA. And that's the Fair Labor Standards Act. And are expected to provide necessary and reasonable overtime services with no additional compensation. The salaries of these positions are established with the requirement in mind. Compensatory time off is at the discretion of and with the approval of the city administrator for exempt employees for other reasons like extenuating circumstances. So to me, this doesn't say that if you're here 2 hours longer today, then you can come in 2 hours longer tomorrow. We used to look at it not in the government, but in the private sector. You expected 50 hours from your executives, and then, after certain, whoever would make the decision, then yes, we begin to accumulate your compensatory time, but I don't know how y'all want to handle this, I really don't. I mean, it's paid straight time when they leave, or it's, you know, I don't know, guys, what do you want to do with it? Darcy?
I have multiple things, like a lot of things. So if somebody else wants to go first, that's fine. But I do have a lot of things with my.
Will you talk in your mic?
No. I have a lot of things because of my 21 years of experience working for the government system and my vast experience working in lots of comp time. So if somebody else wants to go first, that's fine. But I do have a lot of input on this because I do have 5 things that I think actually 6 things that absolutely I feel need to be changed. But I don't think it needs to be tabled. This needs to be done tonight for sure.
Anybody else wish to speak before Darcy gets started?
Go ahead.
Tony?
Mine are fairly short. I said some of my piece last week. In reading all of the suggestions, I think one-to-one, if that's an option, I think that would be most beneficial. Just realized my mic is on. That would be most beneficial if it's one-to-one for the taxpayer itself. We don't have a lot of emergencies, like our police officers in our Department of Public Works. There's things that happen that they can't always control or schedule. I think that they're probably the ones that would be most impacted by this because the city offices, although there probably are some things that might happen that would not allow them to schedule their flex time, like for instance, Jill here's on a city council meeting twice a month. She could schedule herself 40 hours or flex it to where that can still stay within the components of 40 hours a week and not require overtime. But someone that gets to the end of their week and has an emergency situation like with the water, wastewater, our police officer, our marshal's office, I think those are two very distinct positions, and I think that the departments themselves, the managers of those departments, should be really watching that. So if we did time and a half, I think it's a little extended. I think it's a little much. The other thing I would like to point out is although there are a lot of government agencies that allow great amounts of time to be carried over, we're a really small office. A lot of our jobs are one man deep. So anybody that's being allowed to have all this comp time, a use or lose situation at the end of the year, if we allow it to, if we put it as a use or lose and we allow them to accrue up to 80 hours and then don't let them carry more than that, then at the end of the year, we're really going to be impacted from our personnel standpoint. So I think that any time that we can encourage them to, if they had to stay overtime and they had to work 60 hours this week, the faster we can get them to schedule to use that 20 hours or to pay them out, the more benefit the entire staff will be. Because I do not want to get in the same situation we were in before when we had a person who took complete advantage of it and racked it up, got time and a half, wanted comp time, and then by the time she came back from vacation, she couldn't do her job because she was the only one doing the job, and it had piled up so much that then she was working 80 hours a week. So we got ourselves into a hole. So I think we need to look at this as a bigger picture, realize that we are a very small office, we're not a big governmental agency, and our offices work very well together as far as backing each other up, but if we allow this to get out of hand with one employee, that would tip the cart. And I don't think that would be fair to other employees. And so I think that if we allow the departments where they can schedule their overtime or their situation to allow them to flex and take a couple of hours the next day, our office itself would not be as impacted, except of course with the marshal's office and the Department of Public Works. So right now, those are my general comments. Thank you.
Jared?
Yeah, I separate these also by the different departments. One of my points, I feel that city staff, city hall staff, must use the comp time within 2 pay periods, no accrual, no overtime pay at time and a half. And the same with the comp time at time and a half, that should be straight time. I've never seen it done otherwise. Public Works must use the comp time within 2 pay periods. Overtime would be an option for them, and no accumulation. And exempt employees, no comp or overtime compensation time. So you work whatever's required if you're an exempt employee, and so be it. That's the way that job normally is handled.
Tony?
I think that no accrual as a steadfast rule, I think would be, there could be situations where the city staff may be required, and there's no way to get around it. We've had some issues in the past where they've had to prepare things, I'm thinking of all the time we spent to gather the data and the documentation for the FEMA, when we were trying to claim FEMA, and how much time Jeanette spent painstakingly going through every little receipt, trying to get every penny. I think that's justified overtime, and she needed to be compensated for that. So if we don't allow it at all in City Hall, I don't think that we're doing ourselves justice. I do think that we should not encourage them to accrue, but maybe perhaps if it's a special project or something going on that we allow, maybe we require a city council approval or an administrative approval or something of that sort. But I don't think that we should, I think we should leave that little caveat that there are situations, as well as we've been in a situation where we were not fully staffed. It's been quite nice to have a staff a city that's run as efficiently as it's run today with a full staff, because, 2 years ago, or whenever I was elected the first time, we had 0 staff, and everybody was burned out. And as we got the right people in the right positions, they were being burned out too. And so if we don't we're going to make these changes to personnel policy constantly, we don't think of the bigger picture. There are situations where it will require some to be accrued. Now, whether we do it 1 time and a half or 1-to-1 is, but, thank you.
But Jerry, may I ask you a
Yeah,
question?
just to reiterate, those are exceptions. They should be rare. Those can always be allowed for by bringing before City Council. Once you open up the window to allow an exception at the discretion of, that's when things get out of hand. City Hall, the staff, and I'm talking just City Hall, not talking Public Works or the Marshal's Department. There's typically enough people there that they can spread out the work. I mean, how many times, even now, has staff not been there, due to the COVID and et cetera. So, I just don't see the reason behind that. And if there was to be an accrual, I think it should be a cutoff of, say, 20 hours, not the 60 or 80 hours as stated in here.
Jerry, I want to be clear. You were talking about overtime for non-exempt employees being paid at straight time instead of time and a half.
When it comes to their wanting to take comp time,
I'm talking about the clerk. So you don't,
Right.
the clerk has to stay over because the stamp machine died and we got to get this out and there's a deadline, then that clerk would get straight time instead of time and a half for being overtime?
not if we're allowing for overtime, you would have to pay them at time and a half. But if they're gonna I feel that they should only be taking comp time. They shouldn't be getting overtime. And that comp time should be at straight time, not time and a half. I've not seen any place that allows you to have time and a half for comp time.
Rebecca, did
Do you
want
have
to say
something?
first?
I was just curious, I don't know the labor laws, I don't have that right on the front end of my brain.
I can understand.
Sorry, Jerry, I was referring to labor laws and certain requirements for compensation over 40 hours. Anybody have anything to reference for this conversation?
I believe if you are a non-exempt employee, the policy is that they get time and a half for any overtime. That would fall in comp time or overtime also. Unless the policy says that there is no time and a half, that would be the only exception.
You're talking about local policy, sorry, you're talking about local policy right now, though. You're not talking about federal law.
It's under the Fair Labor Standards Act.
That's what I'm asking.
I'd have to look it up.
Mayor, I've worked plenty of places, and they do not pay you time and a half for comp time. You don't get, if you work 10 hours overtime, you don't get 15 hours off. You either have the option of taking a time and a half, or you take straight time.
For your non-exempt employees,
For non-exempt, that's correct.
I just want to be sure that I understand you, man.
Yes.
Excuse me. Please correct me if I'm wrong. So you're saying time and a half pay or straight time if they're choosing comp?
That's correct.
Okay. That's not what I understood the first time,
Okay.
so thank you.
But just to reiterate, I'm sorry, I don't believe that we should be paying overtime, time and a half, period, for city staff. Public Works, that's a different story. If I was them, I get a call in the middle of the night, 2 a.m., and I don't have the option to take time and a half, I probably wouldn't work it.
So just for the sake of discussion, Darcy's, I'm really ready to hear from you.
No, go ahead.
I'm just curious what it would look like in your mind if city staff were, for whatever circumstances, bogged down with a tremendous amount of extra work. And so one of two things is going to happen, right? They're going to say, no, I've worked my 40 hours, I'm clocking out and I'm going home, right?
That's what I do.
But there is such thing as time is of the essence, situations that come up for city staff
Right?
that may require them to work over 40 hours a week. So I'm not fully sold on this idea that there should be zero overtime. I do agree that it should be very restrictive and very much as a as-needs basis with justification. But and then the other piece I've heard a lot of in the past when people were missing from City Hall, folks are like, well, where are they? Well, they've got to take their comp time now because that's what they chose. So then I just don't want to see that backlash to fall on our city staff when they're having to take this time off and now they're not there and they're getting fussed at for that.
But I had already stated 2 pay periods, so they have a whole month to use that.
I think she was calling
Okay.
me, Jerry.
And then if they don't use it, then they would have to be paid out at time and a half overtime.
Tony, you got a comment?
So, we have people in positions, department heads, that we should hold accountable to their budget. And if we budget overtime and budget their salaries, then they're the ones that need to be monitoring the day-to-day. Our policy that we set here is just something that we need to make sure that we draw the line so that they have the flexibility on a day-to-day basis to manage their employees and get the job done. We don't want to, I'm not going to be a manager of the city hall, but our policy should be general enough to where we don't allow someone to take advantage of overtime or comp time or all of these things in their position, but still allow the department heads and those in charge of budgeting the flexibility to manage their people and their department and their workload. That's what we hired them for. So there's a fine line there, but I do think some of the examples are of cities that we don't have that level of personnel us to write the policy to where we're keeping our city in mind, that future councils, future city staff say, we're going to allow you some flexibility, but we don't allow you to go past here. So that's my 2 cents on the matter. I think accountability is key.
Suzanne?
Suzanne?
Yes, Joe. Just to reiterate the reason that this is on the agenda, every department has overtime already budgeted in their department, and that manager does decide when or if those people can get overtime. This came to council for the reason that some employees went from non-exempt to exempt. So we had no compensation policy or flex time policy at all in the personnel manual. So that's why the attorney suggested that we get one or not get one. Right now, we don't have one. There is no comp or flex time policy in the city. The way overtime is handled for non-exempt employees is handled by department, budgeted, or by emergency. If we have a water main break and the guys are out there digging all night, which they've done before, they'll all get overtime. And if they work over 40 hours a week, it's going to be time and a half. That's the law. So the reason that this is on the agenda is because the exempt to non-exempt.
Is it exempt or non-exempt?
Non-exempt is exempt, yes.
Me?
But I think the council's decided that we want to discuss these other items because they are up before us to make a decision on. And no one, I'd already stated that Public Works and the Marshal's Department are the exceptions. And we do budget for those, but the mistake we made in the past, we went from not very far back, I want to say 5-6 years ago, we were budgeting around $5,000 to $10,000 for overtime. Last year, and I think the previous year, we budgeted $50,000. You know, most companies don't even budget for overtime. If there's nothing in the budget for it, you're just told no. You take your comp time or you don't.
Darcy?
Okay, so first I'm going to say that I believe that everybody should get time and a half, whether it's overtime, paid overtime, which I don't think anybody should be getting paid overtime. I think we need to be doing comp time for everybody across the board, but it should be time and a half, period, whether that's the law or not, because I'll be honest, I don't know if it is. But I'll tell you right now that if I was a City of Bandera staff member and I'm not getting compensated time and a half for working overtime, I would be clocking out if my hours were 8 to 5. I'd be clocking out if I worked at City Hall and I had a city council member named Darcy call and say, hey, could you do this or this for me? Because I would like to have this or this. I'm not saying after 5 I'm clocking out. I'd like to go home at 5. So, not that I'm going to do that, but, that's what I would do if I was a city staff member. So, what I did on the resolution is I changed on the top paragraph after it says whereas, and I'll just go to, it says employees may, I crossed out may and changed it to shall. And then I skipped over to by being given the choice payment at the rate of 1 1/2 times the employee's regular hour rate, and I crossed all that out. So I don't believe that they should be given a choice of being paid or getting compensatory time off. I believe everything should be comp time. So there should be no choice. So change it from may to shall. And cross everything from by being to or, and then it'll be compensatory time off all the way through the rest of the paragraph. And then what I would like to see added is actually, we don't have to add this, but what needs to happen, because one, what is fair and legal, is that those that were hourly that went to salary, they need to be paid right away for the comp time that they had earned, because when they were switched over, to my understanding, from being hourly to salary, they were not paid for the comp time that they already had banked, and they have to be paid. They need to be paid for that comp time that they had banked. They need to be paid now for that comp time that they had banked, because they're now salary and they shouldn't be accruing any comp time at all. So they shouldn't have comp time sitting there. They can't use comp time, their salary. So they need to be paid for that. That's got to happen. They also should not be clocking in and out. If you're salary, why are you clocking in and out? If we don't trust these people and it's to be checking to make sure that they're coming and going as their hours should be, why are we trusting them to be our city employees and department heads? So I don't know that that's the reason. I'm just saying, if that's the reason, if that's the excuse, then we shouldn't be trusting them as department heads or administration. So I don't understand why they're clocking in and out. All it's going to do is show more and more comp time racking up, because we put them on salary for a reason. I was put on salary for a reason. It's because I was racking up all kinds of overtime, and the county that I work for was really smart to put me on salary so they didn't have to keep paying me for comp time, or overtime that I was earning. So when they leave, they're going to be expected to get paid for that, whether we think they should or not. That's what they're going to be expecting. So we need to pay them out for what they earned before they were switched out to salary, and quit making these people clock in and out. After they were switched to salary, of course, we should not be paying them any comp time. We need to make that understood and have them sign something saying that they're not going to be getting paid any comp time. From what I understand, they haven't signed anything. They may or may not understand that they weren't going to be getting paid any comp time. So we need to make sure that that's understood. So next I have comp time shall be used within 1 year of the time that it's earned, effective as of the date of the ratification of this policy. So that caps that off. So they need to use it within 1 year of the comp time being earned. Now, that's mostly going to be for, our marshal's office, and then it should be used, flex time, the ladies in the office and stuff like that. Yeah, if they can get them to use the flex time the next day, come in a couple hours late, yeah, let's do that. But it's got to be used within a year. If not, they lose it. Next, employees shall be allowed to use comp time within a reasonable amount of time after it's requested, provided that it does not cause an undue hardship on the department in which the employee works. And that kind of goes to what Tony was saying. We don't want them to wait until the end of the year, and everybody wants to take off at the same time around Christmas, and then there's nobody in the office. So this way they can request off as long as it's not causing an undue hardship on the department. You need to let them have off. And the next one would be comp time is accrued when an employee actually works over 40 hours per work week. When this occurs, comp time shall be granted at 1.5 hours for every 1 hour worked, and not accrued with any combination of less than 40 hours worked and any other type of benefit leave, i.e. vacation time, sick time, funeral, etc. So we're further defining, you can't use it in combination with stuff, so everybody understands that you can't kind of cheat the system. And the last thing is that the city of Bandera shall have the right to require employees to use earned comp time at the convenience of the city. So if Will wants to make one of his deputy marshals use their comp time, so they don't want to take a month off at the end of the year for a vacation to Aruba, he can do that at his convenience. So it's convenient for his department. And that's what I got.
Jerry?
And this is just clarification on a point you made. Mm-hmm. Are you talking use it within a year? Is there any limit on the accrual time?
It's the same that's already in the policy.
How much?
The same that's already in the policy. It's just these are additions to the policy, except for the first change that I made. These would just be additions.
Okay.
Tony?
One thing I thought of was, I think think we had an issue with that same employee, like we had Memorial Day Monday, and then she would work 40 hours on holiday week, and she would, and so I don't think overtime should be calculated with holiday pay. If you're not working 40 hours, that 8 hours doesn't count toward the 40, and I think I saw that in one of the samples that Jill gave us, but I don't think it's in ours, and I think that's important.
That was in Darcy's.
Darcy, is that accumulation of experience or your comments, your
It's accumulation of my experience. I also pulled some of this from 2 of the counties that I've worked for, one that I work for now and one that I'd worked for previously, the wording from their policy manuals.
sounds pretty reasonable to me. Council? Rebecca?
May I ask Darcy to clarify, if I'm not mistaken, I heard you say 0 comp time for exempt employees.
If you're salary, you're salary. Now, should we go back and, I'm sorry if you don't mind, Rebecca.
No, please, yeah.
If you're salary, you're salary. Now, if you want my opinion, I think we should revisit if council didn't. I wasn't here at the time. That we should go back and revisit those that were changed from hourly to salary and bump them to say, hey, you were getting overtime, you've earned this, overtime because you do work over 40 hours. Absolutely, we should do that. Because, as a salaried person, like myself, I'm salaried. I work over 40 hours every single week. I go home and I'm working at home. I'm looking stuff up for my job. I'm making phone calls. I'm on call 24 hours a day. And most of our salaried people are too. I know our law enforcement officer is too, So, yeah, we need to compensate them for that loss of quote unquote overtime that they are working. We absolutely need to revisit that for sure. If that wasn't done.
So you're striking this whole section, or how did you revise this for? And
No.
sorry, I'm pointing to the attachment 3.0303.
I marked that on a different one.
This was in the packet. Oh, there you are. Okay.
Yeah, I printed it the other day. Yeah, so in there it says the salaries of these positions are established with that requirement in mind. So, and then comp time off is at the discretion of and with approval by its city administrator. We could leave that part on there, but I really don't think, unless we had a tornado or a massive flood rip through Bandera, God forbid, that we would have our city administrator say, hey, we're working 3 days in a row, that's going to be necessary.
Okay.
Is it possible? Absolutely. But is it likely? No.
But you're not looking to take that out?
I'm not, no.
Okay.
Will, I think you wanted to address council?
Yes, ma'am. And I agree with a lot of what Darcy, had to say. I will get on the materialistic, narcissistic kick here is that as far as this affects my department, I watch my overtime budget pretty carefully and I utilize our reserves to keep the overtime budget down. If we were to start using comp time instead of the overtime, it would cause a lot of grief in my department. Because that, we previously, when we had holiday time off instead of holiday pay, because we are so few, when I started having to give a lot of time off, what I ended up doing was paying a lot of overtime because, somebody, if they want to take off, they want to take off Monday night when it's slow, they want to take off Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, so they can go somewhere and they can do something. Well, then I have to pay somebody that would normally be off to work. So now I'm paying overtime to give somebody holiday time off, and it's just it's an ugly, vicious, never-ending cycle. So eventually we got away from the holiday time off that you accrued, so you could take off, and, you know, I've got officers that, one that, you know, wants to take that off as soon as he can, and other ones that were banking it up all the time, not because they were trying to cause a problem like what Tony was saying, but because they just didn't ever want to go do anything, and now they've got this big bank of this holiday pay time, it's a problem, and now they're not using that, they're not using their vacation time, which they're gonna lose now, and it's just a big snowball. So I would encourage, and I don't know how that would affect Public Works or City Hall, I just know that for the Marshal Department, that doing away with the overtime and having nothing but the compensatory time would be a disaster.
And I can't speak for the other ones, but I reiterated that that would be the exception. Those two departments should be the exception, because I understand the difficulties you run into.
Yeah, it would just open up.
So I agree with what you're saying.
Now, on the personal note, since I got on salary, what I always envisioned salary was is you got a set amount, a paycheck that was the same amount every month, or every 2 weeks, or every week, no matter if you work 40 hours that week, 80 hours that week, 180 hours that week. This is the first salary job I've ever had, but that's what I had in my mind. Evidently, several years ago, we had actually had a comp time aspect in her, and so there for a while I was accruing comp time under that policy, and then we got a new personnel policy that doesn't have well, since I'm still punching the old time clock, I'm still accruing comp time, and as Darcy said, it's added up, it's up there, and yeah, I'd probably be a lot happier if I didn't know that at the end of the 2 weeks, while that paycheck is the same, and I'm not griping because I took the job for that amount, I get that. Be a lot better off not punching that time clock and not knowing, but the simple facts is there's a big bank. And I've worked at some cities where we had X number of officers that quit, retired, got fired, or whatever in 1 month. And the folks at City Hall had to write some checks, and then they went, ruh-roh. If that happened again next month, the city would be bankrupt. And it wasn't because of retirement or holiday pay, it was comp time. And it's just, it can be a problem. And I agree with having a low accrual amount, a low holdover amount. I just would like to not have it in the Marshal Department at all, because it will just start causing a lot of problems. And figure out something to do with mine, because I'd like to not have to fool with it on mine at all. So that's all I got to say as far as mine goes.
Mind if I ask you a question?
Sure.
How do you think it would affect your department if, I know, having worked law enforcement myself, that I was forced to come in, not that I like to, but was forced to come in. How do you think your deputies would respond to being forced to come in, not asked to come in, to work overtime? I was forced to come in and know that I was only going to get comp time. I wasn't happy about it, but it never forced me to quit a job. Do you think you would have marshals leave?
No, I don't think so. I think it would just be a problem that would snowball. I don't have a problem with any of the guys. If there's something happens when we have floods, problems, if I call them, they come in. I mean, and it wouldn't be a problem. The problem would be that while it might seem like a good idea at the front door, and on the back end, as time went on, it would start being more expensive than it might be penny wise, but it would end up being dollar foolish, because we would start paying overtime so we could burn the comp time, and it's just starting an ugly cycle for us, because a lot of times we're either too many or not enough. Because on a Monday night, like right now, sometimes one of us is too many. I mean, you can't have half of us, half of one person. There's just not a way to do it. But on Saturday morning and Mardi Gras weekend, I can have everybody that works here, including all the reserves that are volunteers, and they get paid only when they're covering a paid shift. Have all of them here too, and it's not even half enough. So it's hard to justify, hey, we need more people, because it's not really true. It's not fair and honest. And the problem is it's covering that kind of stuff and, making it work out on paper. So if we start doing nothing but comp time, it's going to have ugly consequences, not for people being mad or morale being low. It's going to be on paper that it's going to start getting ugly, and it may not be in the first year, but starting the second year or so, it's going to start showing up as budgetary issues. Used to, your overtime was, I think mine is somewhere around $5,000 to $7,000 a year budgeted. I wouldn't swear to that, so if I think I was way under this year, because I got a good group of reserves, and they come in and they cover shifts, and they've been all about that. I've got one officer that gets the majority of the overtime, and he really got a lot less this year. He's also the one that's the least prone to using comp time. So I run the risk of turning the one that's the most willing to come in and help out when there's a problem. That, if I pick up the phone to call him, a lot of times he's already on the way. He has very little incentive to want comp time, because he's the one I'm cracking the whip on at the end of the year, going, you got to take that vacation time or you're going to lose it. He's not trying to rope the city out of anything. He's like me. He is a high growth needs person, and he cares more about work than his happiness in his personal life is derived from his happiness in his job. And so he doesn't take off. He's like me. I had to hurry up and take off vacation so I didn't lose something. I just hate to start that problem. So that's all I have to say. I guess not. So
Question, what do you think would be a reasonable amount of accrual amount for comp time for your department?
Jerry,
What?
Tony had raised her hand. She's
Oh,
going to ask the
well, I
question.
didn't see it. You need to speak up.
She's waiting to be recognized.
Okay, so let's start bringing this big conversation in. I see 3 distinct areas that we need to define. One is exempt, one is non-exempt, where they work 5 8-hour days, scheduled as their typical schedule. And then we have the non-exempt that could possibly work 24/7. Their departments are open 24/7. Whereas the non-exempt that are in the city hall, that are hourly employees in city hall, their department is open 5 8-hour days. And so those 3 types of positions are what we need to handle. Go ahead.
We already had the whole desk audit and the whole deal done before the last budget, so that we would be able to define exempt and non-exempt. Is there another category you want to throw in there?
No, I'm not saying to find another category, I'm saying schedule. I'm talking about schedule. We've got non-exempt people that are in a department where their office is open 5 8-hour days at City Hall. It's not likely to be open any other time. Whereas we've got non-exempt employees that are in departments that are required to work 24/7, and a lot of that may not be scheduled because of emergent situations. So, and then we've got our exempt people. And I think that our exempt people, I do have some issues with reasonable, well actually some of this language up here, reasonable overtime services, special reasons, or extenuating circumstances. It's like things like that. I mean, we just need to get away with that language and use things like upon approval of manager, upon department head approval, something like that that's more defined, where we can hold people accountable for what the decision that they make, and it comes down to one person making the decision, whereas the reasonable, those types of things I think are very vague. And so the things that Will brought up I think are extremely valid. I think they also probably apply to some degree in the Department of Public Works Department, because they do have emergent situations and they are on call all the time. And I think we need to make sure that we cover all of our bases without being too strict on those 2 departments. And they, may have to work a 10-hour day, I think that we should allow our exempt employees to flex schedules. Like if they have to work 10 hours one day, they work 6 hours the next, or, but it's, to me, that's a more controlled environment in City Hall where they can get up with the least amount of impact without keeping track of it.
Let me just give you a perfect example right here, right now, tonight. Jill and Will came in here, set all this up, so from 5 o'clock, they've been here. They're gonna be here until we get out of here, then they're gonna take another whatever long it takes, put the tables back, wipe the tables down, put the decorations back on the tables, load all this stuff up, take it back to City Hall tonight. And they should not be left just, oh, good job, man, thanks, appreciate that.
And that's exactly what I'm saying, is that our exempt employees, if they work over 40, they should be allowed to flex somewhere as the schedule allows, or as the workload allows, or if City Hall is fully staffed, and they can take a couple hours one morning, or something like that. I think that our department heads that are exempt, we should be able, if we can't trust them enough to be honest about it, then we've got the wrong people in the job. Then we have a bigger picture wrong. So I think we need to focus on what Jill was saying, the non-exempt, and I think we need to go down the list and get this going. I would kind of like to see, I heard a lot of what Darcy was saying, and I don't really want to table it, but I do want the details. I'd like to see the details so I can put these in the buckets, and like say, this is where I want the policy, this is where I don't, and then we'd be ready to vote on it the next time. Because she brought up some really good stuff that I didn't have time, but I didn't hear everything in detail, and I don't think I think there are some of the very valid things that need to be added in, but, okay, I'm really supportive.
What I could do, if it's okay with everyone, is maybe email what I said to Jill, and Jill could email it all to council before the next meeting if we want to table it for 2 more weeks, but, or till our next meeting rather. But I would really love to act on, so I know, I do understand and I do agree that, I know it was a lot. And I agree, I think Will for bringing that stuff up, and I would agree with that, and with Public Works as well. But I can email that stuff to Jill, but I cannot, emphasize enough and how important I think that it is that we need to get, those that we made exempt, that council made exempt, paid for the comp time that they had in the bank. It's extremely important that they get paid for that. And if they were not bumped up, they need to be bumped up, and that salary increased for sure for being made exempt, or being made exempt from hourly. That's important.
Yeah, I made a note of that for future agenda items. We'll look at that, Jerry.
Just to agree, I guess, basically, yes, Public Works and the Marshal's Department must be the exceptions. They've got to be handled totally different. So I don't think we're having an argument or disagreement about any of that. I think more of it relates to how we're handling the comp time and overtime. And I feel that you also should have the right to decide yourself whether you're going to want to take time and a half, overtime, or comp time as an employee. So I think maybe some of your concerns aren't necessarily going to be a concern for you, at least in...
Well, I mean, as a salaried employee, I don't have that choice at all, and that wasn't my expectation. And it's something I don't know if y'all know is police officers, the ones that are hourly under the Fair Labor Standards Act, they all work 84-hour bi-weekly periods, and they're not susceptible to overtime until they get to 87 hours. So that's also another reason why there's not just a whole lot of overtime, or it's kept fairly beat down in the Marshal's Department, is because of FLSA and that 87-hour cap, because they do work the 12-hour shifts. And so it is it's not the best thing, but it's the federal government, it's the hand we're dealt. So they have to actually work, they're working 84 hours instead of 80 hours in a 2-week period. It's what they're scheduled, and they actually have to work 80, it's not until they get over 87 hours that overtime even kicks in for them, so. And I've been there, probably worked there for 19 years, it's not like I'm not used to it, it's just, I'm in a different boat now. But to answer your question about the cap, I would still say 0 would be what I would think, because I don't want to have that problem. And if I'm stuck with it, it's going to be like 8 hours or 10 hours, it's going to be very low, because the higher the number is, the more problems we're going to have out of it. And that's just the best honest answer, and I don't think any of the guys would have, I think they would all agree with that, I think.
Darcy?
I lost my train of thought for a second. Hold on. So being salary, I think that, when it's slow and stuff, I know it's a little bit different for peace officers that, say someone like Jill, and Jay ought to be able to take a 2-hour lunch, or you come in an hour late because you worked tonight and you were here 3 hours late and you decide to leave at 4 o'clock tomorrow. Jill saw me show up yesterday at like 3, in the afternoon because I'm salary, and I stay at work until 10 o'clock sometimes, and that's just what happens when you're salary. So that should happen. So it's not like you work until 7 and then you're, okay, well, I should come in 2 hours late tomorrow. So, you just kind of work that out and keep those honest hours with yourself, and we should be able to trust them to do that.
Jerry?
I'd like to make a motion.
A motion? Okay.
I move to table this until our next regular meeting. I'm not sure of the date. I'm not sure of the date for our next regular meeting. I'm sorry?
17.
I'll second.
Tony second,
Oh,
you
I'm
second, we
sorry.
all second. December 17th. Any further discussion?
Yeah.
Yes, Rebecca?
This is really more related to the content as well, not so much the motion itself. Just kind of my piece of the discussion, which I hadn't, before you made your motion, I hadn't had a chance to put my hand up, so I'll just throw it in now. After hearing Will especially, I tend to lean more towards allowing the flexibility of overtime or comp time. I mean, to me, it's kind of like, if it's paid out in that paycheck for that pay period, it's a more accurate and live record of the spending compared to comp time, which is going to be paid out eventually, but it's just going to be accruing for multiple people in multiple departments, and then it'll be cashed in at some point, and then there will ultimately be a deficit in that role wherever it is, and potentially have to be made up for later. So I'm not 100% on board with the going strictly comp time point of view. So I'm hoping that the considerations have those options in them. But I really appreciate everybody's input.
The motion on the table is to table, motion is to table until the 17th, we start the second.
I just want to make one comment based on what Rebecca said. She had a very good point. Not only, I think it's easier to manage rather than the unknown. The compensation time is kind of the unknown, sort of you're keeping track of it, but it's really going to show up really as much on your books themselves if you're not paying it out. So I agree with you. From a budgetary standpoint, penny pinching and counting, I think, comp time is a lot easier.
Okay. All in favor of tabling? All in favor, none opposed. Item 6, presentation. Mayor Pro Tem Rebecca Gibson will provide information for City Council discussion and direction regarding an angler project in Texas Parks and Wildlife.
Hey, thank you, Mayor. So you guys, I believe you have the information that I shared out with you guys regarding this program. This was something that was brought to me from our Texas Water Development Board biologist Ryan McGillicuddy, who was a part of the riparian and erosion control program that we studied recently for the fifth project. So he just basically reaches out and says, through the Fish Stamp Fund, which has historically funded hatcheries, there's a new competitive small grant program. It's in a pilot phase. It's a new expansion of this tax expenditure in the state. So he first emailed me in November. We arranged to have a conference call, which included city administrator, and then later the city secretary joined in. Ryan McGillicuddy, myself, and Daniel Oppenheimer from the Hill Country Alliance. There was a brief discussion about just kind of the basic parameters that they're aiming for this project, and they are that it is a $25,000 to $50,000 grant. No match is required. However, if it's kind of coupled with other either matching funds, in-kind contributions, or other grant programs like the fifth, for example, that it makes it more competitive for approval. It is on a reimbursement distribution. However, they will be allowing for periodic invoicing. And the grants are for angler access and fish habitat. So they project that there will be a request for a formal proposal in February. And before I hit that last bullet on the top section, I'm just going to share with you guys what Ryan submitted. And this was only based on Texas Water Development Board requesting from their biologists programs in their regions. So what he submitted on Bandera's behalf is for a project at the city park for habitat and angler access improvements to establish and enhance riparian grow zones and targeted access specifically for angling along approximately 750 linear feet of the Medina River in Bandera City Park. Project elements include improvements to access road, parking lot, and existing small water craft launch, an accessible path and angling access pad, educational signage, waste and monofilament receptacles, etc. This project would complement and leverage funding from a multi-million-dollar request to the Texas Water Development Flood Infrastructure Fund that would include citywide flood drainage improvements as well as riparian improvements, habitat enhancement, and erosion control plans within another section of the park. And potential partners, he noted, were City of Bandera, Bandera County, River Authority Groundwater District, and Hill Country Alliance. So just to let you guys know, what I plan to do is to form a committee. Anyone interested in joining me to do some research and preliminary work to bring a proposal to council in the future will be welcome to meet with me at Bandera City Park at Fish for Fun on December 16th at 4:30. And if council has any questions for me at this time about this program, I'd be happy to elaborate if I can. Nothing. Gone fishing. Okay, cool.
Okay then, let's move on to item 7. Requested announcements. Request by council to place items on the future agenda. I have the budget amendment on here that Darcy had spoken of. Tony?
I actually thought of something back when we accepted Jamie's resignation, or when, did we already ask for applications, and what are we doing about that? Is that something that?
That wasn't on the agenda, but I think since, we already know Jay's going to resign, we should follow our standard protocol, put it on the TML website.
I just wanted to make sure that we didn't need a city council resolution or some kind of motion for that to go forward, because, if he's leaving on the 15th, we're already behind.
Yeah, the one thing I wanted to double check with Jay, and I haven't done it yet, is the description for the job that he's now holding. Do we have a city administrator's job description?
We do.
The one that you were hired under, or is it a new one?
It's what I was hired under.
Okay.
What's changed?
Nothing. It was just that we had 4 or 5 floating around at one time, and I didn't know which one was the current one.
So, I'm sorry, are we at requests?
Yes,
Or
we
Yeah,
are.
when I was on request, I wanted to know if that needed to be on the next agenda.
Right.
That was my reason for bringing that up.
So are you asking for the job description to be placed on
I'm
the next
not,
agenda?
I was asking if we needed a city council motion, if we did,
To post for the
next agenda.
position. Okay.
Yes, Rebecca?
We had tabled, Simple City and adopting phase 2, option A or B at our December 3rd. No, it was supposed to be on tonight's agenda according to the language in the minutes for the way it was tabled. And so I want to make sure that's on our very next meeting and not later because it was voted on by council for it to be on the meeting, the agenda tonight, and it was not.
I agree, we looked that over, but we're trying to get together a joint workshop on the 15th.
I would just request that regardless of the workshop that we get that on the agenda.
I've got it.
Thank you.
I thought that was decided that we were going to, did y'all make a motion for that? For option 2? Okay. I don't remember that being, I was listening to it, but I thought.
It was
y'all
discussion.
actually-
I thought we had to, but it was tabled. Sorry.
Interesting. Thanks.
No, we were discussing, we never even got into what was the difference between option 1 and option 2. Okay, anything else? Darcy?
You said that the budget amendment that I talked about, was that for the EDC?
No, for the salaries.
Okay. Also a budget amendment for the transfer that Ben was speaking about earlier.
I got that one.
Okay.
You got that one?
Yes.
Okay.
And then the workshop that you and I had spoken about, right, okay.
Yeah.
So if it was
It's in my,
noted tonight that we need to make a decision for Ben.
Yes.
Yeah.
yeah, the one that we talked about with the EDC.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else? So how about item B, announcements by council? We have, what do we have?
Fish for fun.
Fish for fun on the 16th.
16, we were able, BEC granted us $1,000 sponsorship, so we were able to get 100 fishing poles this year instead of 50. They're really cool this year. They have their Star Wars and they light up. Eagle Claw also sent 100 kits with hooks and bobbers. Honda National Bank bought 100 beanies for the kids for their heads. And Misfits Emporium donated 100 pairs of gloves, or ordered them. We got them today. So it should be really great. Willie and a couple of the other marshals have volunteered their time this year because Atmos is donating the food, but because of COVID, they can't come and cook it. So Willie and another marshal or two have donated their time to come down there and cook the hot dogs and things that Atmos donated. And then, of course, we have our normal group of volunteers that are going to help the kids fish and things. So we hope that y'all will come for that. And then the second thing is Pioneer RV Resort has donated this room for us for the last 2 meetings, free of charge, for just a community service for them. So we just want to be thankful to them for letting us use the room at no cost to the citizens.
Rebecca?
I'll just reiterate that I am coattailing on Fish for Fun, and I thought it was appropriate for the first Angler Park Committee meeting, so if any citizens, people watching at home are interested in joining, I plan to be at the flagpole at 4:30 in City Park.
Thanks. Okay, anything else?